dear Millennium Prize winner, Professor Frances Arnold, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, warmly welcome to Aalto University. My name is Tuija Pulkkinen. I'm the Vice President for Research and Innovations at Aalto University, and it is my special pleasure to host this event at the premises of Aalto University. The Technology Academy of Finland is a strategic partner to Aalto University, and we have a special role in the Millennium Technology Prize. We namely have the exclusive right to propose members to the selection committee. And through that, we have the responsibility and right to ensure that we look at the prize winners in the widest possible sense in all areas of technology. We also collaborate with the Technology Academy of Finland on many other fronts, especially on increasing awareness and interest of the young generation in the technology, areas of technology and natural sciences. But today it is time to continue the celebration of the Millennium Technology Prize, and the awardee of 2016, Professor Frances Arnold, and go into the panel discussion where we have highly distinguished panelists to discuss the various aspects of these issues. And now I'll give the word to the moderator of the panel discussion, Chair of the Board of the Technology Academy Finland, Professor Marja Makarow.
This afternoon, the title is What Does It Take to Become an Innovator? We have 5 specialists here in the panel who will cover different areas of the pathway of young people to becoming an innovator. And may I ask you, dear panelists, to come up front? And I will briefly introduce you to the audience. So, Mr. Andreas Schleicher, maybe you take your seat here, maybe in the order that you will be speaking. So the next one would be Tuula after Andreas Schleicher, and then Robert Jan Smits, please, and then Johanna Ivaska, and then Risto Siilasmaa. So I will repeat the names of our panelists and tell you why they were chosen. So we are going to look first at the foundation, which is education. And we will first hear about what challenges future learning and teaching will face. And here we indeed have Mr. Andreas Schleicher from the OECD. He's Director for Education and Skills, and he governs the entire PISA exercises, where, as you very well know, the OECD countries' competencies of the young children is being assessed, and he's also a specialist in what concerns now the future of teaching and learning in schools. Here we have then Tuula Teeri, who is president of the Aalto University. And of course, the Aalto University, being a new university, has all the possibilities, so to say, to capture the newest things, what concerns now university education of young people. Then we have Robert Jan Smits, who is Director General of the Directorate Research and Innovation at the European Commission, and he will talk about the policies, strategies, and the European level funding instruments that are available then for researchers and innovators. Then we have two cases, if you allow me to use this term. We have Johanna Ivaska, who belongs to the very successful younger generation of fundamental researchers in this country, and she will highlight the importance of excellence in basic research, what concerns now research itself and innovation. And then we have Risto Siilasmaa, who is chairman of the board of Nokia Corporation, and of course you will know that he's going to take the point of view of innovation. And now we are conducting this panel discussion in the following way. I will first ask Andreas Schleicher to give a kick-off intervention of his area, which is school teaching. Thereafter, Tuula, I will ask you to follow with what concerns university teaching, and then we will break for a first slot of discussion, and I will ask the floor to pose questions and comments, and also you panelists, of course, may pose questions and comments yourselves. Thereafter, we will continue with you, Robert Jan, and after your intervention, we again will break and discuss the European enabling policies and funding instruments. And thereafter, we have fundamental research and innovation presented one after another, and then we will break concerning those topics, and then we will conduct a general discussion. And before we start, I would like to acknowledge that we have a lot of young people here. We have high school students, especially from Tampere University here, and we also have university students in the audience, and of course then other experts and people interested in this particular theme. So you're all very, very welcome. So Andreas, shall we start with you, please?
Thank you so much, and I want to start by congratulating Francis, the winner, but even more so Finland for recognizing its innovators. Don't take that for granted. In fact, we asked 90,000 teachers around the world whether if they're more innovative in their teaching, they're going to be recognized and rewarded for this. And in fact, it turns out only about 1 in 4 teachers feel that education is an environment that is fostering innovation for their own work. 3 out of 4 teachers still believe, education is a rather innovation hostile environment. If we want to create innovators, we got to change that. We need to building learning systems that are better in anticipating the kind of skills our societies are going to be rewarded. Leverage the potential of every learner. Find more innovative ways to think about what we learn, where we learn, when we learn, how we learn. Those are the kind of questions we need to ask ourselves, because the kind of things that are easy to teach, easy to test, have also become easy to digitize.
Yeah, please raise the level of the...
Have also been easy to digitize, automate, outsource. In fact, the skills that are less and less important in our societies, declining steepest in demand, are what we call routine cognitive skills, things to remember. The capacity to extrapolate from what we know, use our knowledge creatively is becoming more important. Social skills are rising in importance. The world is changing very fast. In the past, we told people where to go. We gave them a map, and we believed that's going to last for life. Today, what you need is the kind of compass and the navigation skills that help you find out where to go. Knowledge is always going to be important. It's central. But we can think across disciplinary boundaries. In fact, Finland is pioneering this now in its education system, helping young people to think across disciplinary boundaries. Innovation is not, learning something. It's about connecting the dots where the next idea, the next innovation is going to come from. It's about systems thinking, building sort of systems. It's about design things. Innovation is not just about creativity. It's a very careful, systematic process. It's about information literacy, digital literacy, global competency. The things become really important, but when you look at the skills underpinning this, creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, the kind of social and emotional skills that we often take as byproducts, they become central for innovation. even character qualities. Now, people don't like to sort of talk about this so clearly, but empathy, resilience, curiosity, courage, leadership, central for being a successful innovator today, thinking in ways that are different from the ways other people have thought, questioning the established wisdoms of our times, encouraging young people to take risks, to take mistakes, to grow with their mistakes. They are important. And that brings me to the last topic. It's about this kind of meta-cognitive. How do I know what I know? How do I build a lifelong, life-wide capacity to grow and continue with my learning? And it's not an abstract idea, it's very concrete. I give you one piece of data from our PISA study. On the vertical axis, you have the success of education systems to teach people mathematics. And Finland is doing really, really well. But on the horizontal axis is something else. This is the belief of people in their own abilities to overcome problems that are very, very difficult. Something where Finland is not doing so well. Country like Shanghai, the Chinese, they believe, if they try hard, they're going to succeed, they're going to overcome every difficulty. Not so common in Finland. We need to put greater emphasis to those kinds of dimensions. When you ask teachers about this, they think they found the answer. If teaching is about, not content, it's about putting students at the center. It's about, helping students learn on themselves rather than teaching them. And that's actually quite uniform across countries. Most teachers in most countries have a very good idea what creating innovation, fostering innovation, good learning is looking like. But when you look actually at the flip side, what actually happens in classrooms, the picture looks very different. For example, students learn in groups, learn together, rather than being taught by a teacher. Most teachers think that's good teaching, but actually, as you can see here, it's happening much less frequently than you imagine. Project-based learning, having students basically build their own ideas, their own dreams, live their dreams, develop their ideas. Everybody talks about it. Actually, the likelihood of this happening is quite rare. Technology is an amazing potential. Now, basically, why should students learn from a textbook that was printed 2 years ago when they can have access to the world's knowledge anywhere in the world? When we can support new pedagogies, collaborative learning, collaboration for knowledge creation. We can basically experiential learning. Every student now has the chance to go to a laboratory, to play, to try out ideas. We have those potentials. We have hands-on pedagogies. You can call it whatever you like. Technology is a great enabler. But you could see before, it's not yet happening. We're not yet very, very good to draw out those kinds of ideas in education. The 4 things that we can really do better. One is, to regroup our educators, help people collaborate differently, to regroup our learners, creating more innovative learning environments, building new pedagogies. Those are the big challenges of our times to foster innovation. And I want to, again, Finland, the most teachers I admire most are Finnish teachers. They have led the world in reinventing education. But when you look at sort of collaboration among teachers, direct exchange of information happens. But when you look at the kind of deeper collaboration, the combination of professional autonomy and the collaborative culture that is so important to create this environment for innovation, you can actually see happens quite rare. There's a lot of things basically to develop, a lot of things that we can do to make innovation more common, to create an environment that fosters innovation in education. Why do I say this? Because we actually see that where teachers do more of those things, where teachers have a more collaborative culture, like for students, we actually have teachers who also are more effective, who believe in their own abilities, who are not feeling themselves isolation. Isolation is the enemy of innovation. Innovation is about collaboration, about exchange of ideas. Thank you very much.
Tuula, I have changed my plan because this was such a package that I think that we need to, to give room now for some questions concerning your intervention. Is this okay, Tuula? So, any questions? Marit, please, and I would like to introduce to the audience Marit Rossi, who is a teacher in mathematics, and she was finalist in this global Best Teacher of the World competition. So, Marit. The microphone is coming.
As a teacher, I just believe such many things what you mentioned above. But what I was wondering, the global study of OECD wrote that investing heavily in schools' computers and classroom technology does not improve pupils' performance. So what do you think are really the reasons that it's so much behind of what you were just talking about?
In fact,
Sorry. Okay, please keep it.
what you cite is absolutely true. One of the biggest surprises that we found is that the more teachers use technology in the classroom, the lower their learning outcomes, including digital skills. Is the problem technology? No, actually, technology is fantastic. There are many, many really good examples. What we lack is the pedagogies to actually leverage technology. Technology can amplify great teaching, but technology will never replace poor teaching. When students sit in the classroom and copy and paste things from Google, they're actually going to come out with worse learning outcomes and be taught in a very traditional way. So developing 21st century pedagogies to leverage 21st century technology is the future. But the reality, if I look at it across OECD countries, we have students of the 21st century, we have teaching methods of the 20th century and schools of the 19th century. It's a big gap potential and the reality.
Thank you. Risto, please.
Yeah, if I may make a short comment, because I did something that I have never done before. I read a dissertation on teaching from a PhD student, and what she described there as the essential components of teaching were exactly the same things that I have come to conclude are the essential components of leadership. And therefore, the importance of the personality of the teacher, i.e. the leader in that group, is such an essential one that it really builds on what you two were discussing. And the leadership of the leader doesn't mean that that person is an authoritative leader. You can be a collaborative leader. You can adapt different styles for different situations. But leadership is what teaching is all about.
Thank you. Comments, questions? School students, high school students, do you have anything to say? What do you say about this? You mentioned, Andreas, this self-confidence. So are you full of self-confidence, or do you feel that there's a deficiency there? Girls, in mathematics. Yes, you look as if you would like to say something. Is there a microphone? Onko se microphone?
What was the question?
So do you read mathematics? Do you
mathematics?
Sorry?
Was it about how self-confident you're in mathematics, or?
Yes. Do you feel confident, self-confidence in when you're learning mathematics? Because there was a comment from our intervener here that there may be a lack of confidence amongst the Finnish school children, whereas the outcome in the PISA assessment is very high. So what is your reaction to this?
Well, I feel pretty but I don't know.
Good. Yes, good. Frances, you are now a woman working in the STEM area, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and you see yourself, and rightly so, as a role model for young girls. So would you have a comment on mathematics and the STEM domains concerning now young girls in schools? The microphone is coming.
I don't know why girls wouldn't do it. It's just as fun as can be, and they're awfully good at it. So my comment is, why even worry about it? Just go do it.
Okay, good. That's encouraging. Any other comments at this point? Any questions to Andreas Schleicher? If not at this point, then we go on over to the university sector. Please, Tuula.
Yes, hello everybody. I would like to first say that we did not coordinate, or I did not hear his talk before I made mine, because the messages are very similar. But one of the things that we are thinking about very much in the universities is how can we be helping to accelerate innovation or entrepreneurship, which is not a sort of a traditional talent of universities. And I can say that this is something that I think is a kind of European-wide challenge, that this is the discussion in almost all the committees, is that we have excellent science, and why does it turn into businesses? I'm not sure that all of this is true, because we do have also excellent businesses which have been generated based on research, but that's the general impression, that we could do much more. And the question is why and how we can improve this situation. And I think that one of the things that has already been kind of touched on here is that the innovative capacity, in a way, is a talent of its own. You were mentioning about this kind of how people's personalities come in, or Risto was saying that the talent of entrepreneurship or innovative capacity, it's a little bit maybe kind of its own talent. We can say that you can be a good mathematician, or you can be a good actor or artist, but innovation is also something that you can be good at without even being trained. And it kind of consists of these kind of elements that actually are quite typical also for university researchers. It's often said that why are researchers not having innovative capacity? But when you actually look at the talents that are needed for innovators and researchers, they're very similar. So one of the things is that you have to be able to make connections between things that seemingly are unrelated. So that's one of the things that scientists do every day, but it is also something that good innovators do all the time. The other thing is questioning, sort of challenging something that we think that's how things are, and then you sort of start thinking, but is it really so? That's also very typical for both entrepreneurs and scientists. And then networking was also mentioned here, that it's very seldom that scientists or entrepreneurs work alone. So they oftentimes find a team which is kind of sparring each other to develop the ideas further, and they often have complementary skills. And then the other thing is that you have to experiment with new things. Of course, if you are doing experimental science, you have to dare to take the step to make a new experiment, even at the risk that it's going to fail. And it's the exact same thing with the entrepreneurship, that if you don't dare to try a new business idea, then obviously you are not going to be very successful. So it requires that you tolerate risk and failure. So I think that it's hard to say that there's something inherently different in the researchers or teachers which is preventing them becoming innovative. And the question is why do we have this experience still? And I think that in one way we can say that it was also mentioned here already that you need to kind of mix things, to have the kind of combination of people and ideas which make us question and take these risks much better. And so Aalto was founded about 6 years ago to combine different areas of research, in science and art and technology and business. And what we are already seeing is that this combination, that you put an artist in the middle of chemical engineering students, for instance, is actually making the chemical engineering students to think in a different way. I'm not saying it's better or worse, but it's definitely different. And it's the same thing that, some of the things that the chemists are doing are actually inspiring new designs with the artist. So mixing different kinds of competencies seems to be very important for entrepreneurship and innovation. The other thing is that what we see is that when we mix competencies, it's not only between disciplines, but it's also different types of activities. So when we collaborate, for instance, with industries, we get very inspired because their challenges and their questions are such that we don't have the answers yet. And it is inspiring us then to make new experiments and to find the answers. So it's a kind of a two-way street that everybody learns, and that's why it's productive for both sides. And so in education, what we are trying to do now is to kind of realize the same kind of model, to say that if we want to train entrepreneurs, then maybe we should have entrepreneurs as teachers, because the scientists are focusing on the science base, which is very, very important for many kinds of innovation. But if we want to turn our students and give them entrepreneurial skills, the mix we need is actually to combine the scientific excellence and the solid bases and technology with something that helps them to think and imagine how you can start a company or how you can generate an innovation, which then also means that you have to have these commercial skills. So basically what we do at Aalto is that we hire what we call entrepreneurs in residence or executive in residence, who actually provide that part of the teaching which is needed for the innovative capacity and entrepreneurship. And we're getting really good results. And what our students are getting at Aalto is that we have, for instance, one educational program or facility where the students do their diploma works, so that the industries are pitching in ideas. And then the students make multidisciplinary teams which are solving the problems of the industries. And what we find is that, first of all, our students are very capable of solving these real life problems. And also they are extremely motivated, because it's not just practice, but it is actually a real problem. And if they find a solution, there's a chance that the company might actually implement it, to make a real product out of it. And if the companies are not interested, then sometimes the students will come up an idea to start their own company. So I think that the one thing universities should do and could do is to give a possibility for these different kinds of talents, entrepreneurial talents or innovative talents, to enter into the university environment and not just stay as an academic silo, but open up for different talents that complement the academic excellence. And I think this line of development would generate more innovations to the market also from the academic activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuula. You have established different modes to activate students to think about entrepreneurship and innovation. So would you like to explain a little bit? You have the startup saunas and other modes in place?
Actually, the students have inspired us to think entrepreneurial, because the entrepreneurial movement at Aalto started actually with the business school students here, started to think about, that they have traditionally been trained, to work in large companies, but what if they wanted to become entrepreneurs, so where's the training? And they started this Aalto Entrepreneurship Society, who actually on their own realized that university doesn't really have a good education for this kind of thing, so they generated their own education. And they found, these coaches and these entrepreneurs actually in Silicon Valley, who then came back to Finland to coach them, and started together with the students this startup sauna that is now accelerating these student-driven startups, and is also organizing events, where entrepreneurs and companies and investors can meet each other and share the ideas. So again, it's the kind of mixing these competencies. And what we have been doing as the university is to try to follow up this scheme, and to kind of scale up these kind of programs so that more students could have access to these entrepreneurial programs. But we're still using entrepreneurs to teach those programs.
Thank you. Are there any students who have been involved in entrepreneurial training or startup saunas or in Slush? Yes, please. Would you have a comment, Alexander? Microphone here, please. Tell a little bit about your background. Where do you study?
Yes, I study here at the business school. And I've been doing stuff with Aalto ES and Slush, and for example, this device came out of Design Factory, so I'm using one right now. But what I noticed, at least in our program, is that we get to form these multidisciplinary teams and meet new people, and you kind of get a feeling to how different people with different backgrounds think, and I think that's a great richness.
Thank you. We have here Darja Tatai. Darja is former member of the governing board of the European Institute for Innovation and Technology. She was indeed in the research assessment exercise here of the Aalto University some years ago, and she is a specialist what concerns now the innovation process and how to enable that. So would you have a comment on what Tuula just told us about entrepreneurship training and mindset and changing the culture?
I'm very much fascinated by how Aalto captured the energy of students. I was really at the birth of the university, and in my book I describe the startup sauna, the venture garage, and trying to share this knowledge. I know that you've been copied in Singapore, I guess. But
Actually, I have a question to you. This morning I met with Irio Nuevo, who was the CTO of Nokia, and we talked about Nokia's success and then inability to capture the competition and how fast it happened. And now he described also the Aalto University learning from industry, including the industry, and that you actually want to create even more entrepreneurship in 2007. So my question to you actually is, how do you, if you're a role setter, if you're setting up the path quite unusual for European universities, and you learn from students, you know, how do you make it happen on a systemic level, trying to compete with yourself in a way and overcome and reinvent what is already out there? You're a pioneer, right?
Thank you. So when it comes to entrepreneurship, you know, then, you know, what we're actually trying to do is to kind of generate the same kind of coaching system for our researchers, because oftentimes, you know, it is so that we've had this discussion at lunchtime today, you know, that professors, myself included, you know, we don't really have an interest for other than really do the scientific excellence and do the sort of technology development, and it's the science and the curiosity that is driving us. And then when we come up with some idea, you know, we need to partner with someone who can help, you know, either take over or help us, you know, found the company, because that's not part of our training and it's not necessarily part of our passion. So basically one of the things is to try to disseminate, you know, this model of entrepreneurship training and coaching, you know, to also to the researchers. And when it comes to industry collaboration, you know, the thing is that what we find is that, you know, the most mutually productive way of collaborating with industries is when it's long term. And in Finland, you know, we have had very tight collaborations with industries, but we've also had a kind of a funding system that is a little bit promoting these sort of project type, rather short-term collaborations. And I think that, you know, if you want to have this kind of an innovative learning process, you know, the timescales need to be longer and they need to be based on partnerships and not just project collaboration. So those are the two things that we're thinking about at the moment.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? May I go shortly back to the school level, and you mentioned, Andreas, that teamwork, sharing, collaborating is essential, and amongst the teachers, for instance. So Juha Yläjäski, who is the CEO of the Technology Academy Finland office, Juha, would you like to say a few words about this to me, fantastic operation that TAF is involved in, which is having the young school children design a moving toy. And the point here, over there is Juha, and the point here is that they work in teams. It's teams of 4 in which they create these toys. Would you like to say a few words about this, how it works and what the program is?
Yeah, thank you, Marja. This is actually an operation that I have been involved already since 10 years, when I worked previously to my present engagement at the Federation of Finnish Technology Industries, who is actually behind this initiative. So we are talking about kids between, say, 8 and 11 years old, and we are providing these kids a materials package consisting of standard office equipment. Like Marja said, but the kids are working on this project during their normal school lessons, of course, the kids are fascinated by this open task, moving toy from the real glue behind this. By the way, this winter we had about 12,000 kids in Finland, but and last weekend during the Millennium X event we had the grand finals, the national finals. They have school competitions, different teams, regional competitions in Finland, and the best teams will come to Millennium X for the finals. Now the real clue is not this fun part, but the educational clue is that, of course, when they start this whole project, the teacher will tell them that, okay, before you actually start, you have to make a plan. So a project plan is required. And after each lesson, when they have done something, they are required to write a report on what they have done. So plan, reporting is important. So when they are further in the project and they have sort of, they get the toy to a certain state, then there will be a question, well, who would actually want to buy this toy? So marketing plan is also important. And then when we get to the competition, they are told that, well, now a jury will come to see your toy, and there are many toys present, so you will only have a very short time to convince the jury that your toy is the best. So the elevator pitch will also come into play. Well, these are just some examples on what happens during the project, but we are all very excited about this thing, and what. Thank you.
Thank you, Juha. Any interventions on what we heard? Or shall we? Yes, Tuula.
Just, back to this idea of confidence, that I think that, this is exactly what you learn in these kind of courses, that you go stepwise, towards something that you first think that is quite difficult to do. And I think that with entrepreneurial skills, we should really start much earlier. So one of the initiatives which you haven't actually had time to launch yet, is this entrepreneurial preschool, to really start early, for teaching people the entrepreneurial spirit or the attitude that nothing is impossible by definition, some things are just harder than others. But I think this is an example, really good thing, would be really nice to see, if schools could implement more of this kind of entrepreneurial training, in teaching various things.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think these projects are fantastic, and they do exist. We have to still ask ourselves why they are so rare in our schooling system. They are the exceptions, they are not the norm. In the next PISA round, we have actually assessed students on collaborative problem-solving skills, the capacity of students, to collaborate, compete, and connect. And you're going to be surprised how great difficulties 15-year-olds have to learn from and with others and to work with others. And I think the source of the problem is the very industrial work organization that we have in education. It's still the kind of factory model where I believe, somewhere in the Ministry of Education, they know what students need to learn and they tell a lot of teachers what to do, and then it happens someday in the classroom. The best Minister of Education can no longer solve the challenges of, millions of students, hundreds of thousands of teachers, 10,000s of schools. But if we can mobilize the knowledge, that is in students and teachers and actually, combine, share and connect that knowledge, we can create the best education system. We have to ask ourselves quite honestly, why is that not a reality? It is a reality in our societies, in our economies, but I don't think our learning systems are anywhere near that.
Thank you.
...6 years before they come to me. And they are drawing very sad pictures. They are sitting alone in the rows and the teacher is in front of the blackboard. And after 3 years, when they have possibilities to study differently in groups and research and do in hands and find information from the internet, they draw totally different pictures. They are smiling and they remember different situations in the math lessons. And this is totally global problem. I meet so often people who hate mathematics, and I think it's because the content is so boring. It's no connection to the real life. When you make the connections to the student's life, they love it.
Didn't you, Marit, reorganize the classroom?
Yes.
That's what I read in the papers, to conform to these new ideas, how to co-create. Okay. Then I think that we go over to, well, before we go to you, Robert Jan, one question to you, Andreas. in the next PISA round, are the criteria going to be the same as in the previous one, the target for your examination and assessment, or is there an evolution going on according to what you just described to find new parameters in the PISA assessment?
Yeah, there's a lot of evolution. I mean, in 2000, when we tested reading skills of people, we tested how people read on paper. Nobody reads on paper anymore. Today, literacy is about constructing knowledge. It's about, interacting with devices. So now we're looking at digital literacy, not print literacy. We are looking, as I just mentioned, on collaborative skills for the first time. The power of innovation is really not, how good are you in your own field of specialization, but are you able to see how other people think differently? Are you able to work with people who think differently, are differently from you? Are you able to collaborate, compete and connect? So this is something we have been actually testing in the next round, and I think the future has to evolve. I mean, diversity is coming into this. We're looking at global competency in 2018. If the reality around us evolves, we've got to make sure that the metrics that we use to look at success are evolving as well. Entrepreneurship, creativity are very, very important dimensions in our next PISA round.
And the next round will be closed when?
December this year is going to be results from 2015 and then 2018.
Okay.
After.
Thank you. So now we go to Robert Jan Smits, and we now step up to the level of the researcher. Okay, school, university, researcher, and now of course Horizon 2020 is the largest research program in the world with more than 80 billion euros available, and the Commission has been very keen in driving research and science policy in Europe, so you are guiding research policy strategies, and then of course you have this portemonnaie of such a big amount of euros. So Robert Jan Smits, it's your turn.
Okay, thank you very much. Is it working? Yeah, it is. What it takes to become an innovator, that was the topic for today. And what I did is to look a little bit what some top innovators have said themselves about innovation. And Steve Jobs, I think we all know, he said, innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. And Eric Schmidt from Google, he said, the characteristics of great innovators is that they see a space that others do not. They don't just listen to what people tell them, they actually invent something new. Something that you don't know you need it, but the moment you see it, you say, I must have it. So what then can governments do, funding agencies do to help people to be innovative, to think out of the box, to be creative, to be passionate, to be vibrant? I think first of all not to pamper people, but to really help people to exploit and to develop their own creative strength. And it starts with me, first of all, by having, and that's the global picture, by having a society which is open to new cultures, which is open to new ideas, which is open to all kinds of religions, which is diverse, which is allowing people of different backgrounds to get together. And I think the most dynamic and innovative societies and countries we have in the world are exactly those countries, which welcome foreigners, which don't make a problem about your background, your religious background, but really let everyone who is willing to contribute to society do its thing. The second thing what government can do, and it was already mentioned, I think by the previous speakers, is of course to build creativity, entrepreneurship inside the education system. And there we still have a long way to go, because if I look at many of the education systems across Europe, they are very much old-fashioned way of doing things. So from that point of view, government has to make sure that the education system remains modern and really up to the highest standards. And there it was already mentioned, Finland is a fantastic country, which has really set, I think, the role model of modern education over the last decades. But also Finland is now at the moment facing the challenge how to continue. We know that the PISA results are not what they were in the past. We know that there's quite some criticism on the current way of teaching in Finland. So it will be quite interesting to see how Finland, as a very innovative country, is indeed taking things forward and developing new curricula and developing new ways of doing things. Whereby I think one element will be important, and that is to really push people to deploy and to use the strongest creativity they have in them. Not to pamper people, but to really do everything that people give the best of themselves. Now and then with regard to more funding programs, because Marja, you rightly talked about research and about Horizon 2020. And for those of you who don't know Horizon 2020, it's the biggest science and innovation program in the world, 80 billion euro. And we are increasingly using the funds not just to allow, as Nobel Prize winner Tim Huntworth mentioned, the best people to follow their nose by exploring the frontiers of knowledge, but we also increasingly try to see to what extent we could turn these ideas, this knowledge generated, into products and processes. Because that is something, as you rightly say, Marja, which has been a European problem. We have been very good always in turning euros into knowledge, but not very good in turning the knowledge back into euros. We are, as continent, with only 7% of the world population, 7% of the world, we produce 1/3 of the world's knowledge, which is amazing. But we need to harvest that knowledge we are producing more than ever before. So there's going in our funding programs much more attention to allow the research results to be transferred to processes and to products, proof of concepts, demonstrators, first of a kind pilot lines, to really make sure that everything we generate as knowledge is really also find its way to application. And we have next to us, I think, a good example, because you have a proof of concept, if I'm not mistaken, of a top scientist who really is working on frontier research, exploring the frontiers of knowledge, but also interested in turning the results of the knowledge into products and processes. So that's indeed a big issue at the moment, impact. Letting people think about impact. I'm not saying that we step away from bottom-up schemes. We will always continue that. We will always continue with selecting the best of the best and going for excellence as sole criteria. But increasingly we want that the scientists in Europe also think and start thinking about, more than ever before, how can they, for the benefit of society, turn the results of their research into products and processes, and not just run from one project to another, get money from one project to another, but really think about the deployment of the research results for the benefit of society. One element, since there are many young people here in the room as well, for the openness and for diversity, use the mobility programs of the European Union. You know Erasmus, and I think many of you know the Erasmus program, have used it. Use Marie Skłodowska-Curie. These are mobility programs. I myself have been on several mobility programs in the past, and that has completely created a different mindset. And going to other countries, talking to other people, meeting other people is so enriching, and that will really shape you as a person. So I can only advise everyone here sitting, use these fantastic mobility and exchange programs which we have been developing as European Union over the last number of years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have in the audience any young people who have used the Erasmus program? Okay, let's hear some experiences. Maybe can we start with you?
And not only about the parties, eh?
No, yes, the microphone. Yes, please. Advance there, on the right. No, please raise your hands. Yes.
Thank you. So, what kind of experience do you need me to talk about? Is studying experience?
Erasmus program.
Yes.
You have been taking.
I took Erasmus Mundus program from 2010 and 2012 as a master student.
You came from
third country.
You went from where to where?
From China to France and France to Finland.
Okay.
Yes.
And that has been beneficial for you?
Yes, of course, not only from the language and culture point of view, but also the way of teaching and the pedagogical way for me to learn science and practice laboratory work in the academia, and also do presentations, and also for the workshops and the collaborations among a variety of nationalities.
And now you're here in which university? Okay. Anybody else wants to make a comment on the Erasmus experience? Yes, here please. We have a hand up here. Please. Whoops, that's the idea. Please keep it very close to your mouth.
Yes. So I have.
Nousit sä ylös, että sut nähdään.
Yeah.
Can you stand up please so we can see you? Thank you.
So I have been on one Erasmus trip to Holland, and now I'm working with 2 different Erasmus trips, one to Poland and one to Scotland. And I have to admit that all of them have been really beneficial, and it's always fun to make new contacts, but it's also a great way of learning to speak different languages, not only English, but when there's people who can't understand English, you also have to know some other languages. And I've really enjoyed them myself, and also the process for trying to find the funding is really difficult, and it's a great way of learning new ways of using languages, and also sort of new ways to interact with people.
Good.
They are really beneficial, and I surely recommend all Erasmus to everybody.
Good. Anybody else?
Can I make a comment?
Yes, of course.
So often when I've taken someone in my research group who actually has been on an Erasmus, a mobility thing, they've usually been always really good. They're good party spirits, but they're also often they have more self-confidence. They don't shy away from challenges as much, and I think with now the experience I've had in running a research group for many years and recruiting people from different backgrounds, I think having a mobility on your CV usually is a sign that you're also willing to take challenges, you're willing to move out of your comfort zone, and that very, very often correlates with your performance and your ability to endure the hardship of research as well. So I would definitely recommend everybody to take that step. I think it's really useful. So well done.
Thank you, Risto.
Well, I personally think that studying abroad as part of your university studies should be mandatory. It shouldn't be optional, it should be mandatory, because it's so useful. But if I may go back to something you said, you mentioned some statistics about Europe, and statistics can build you a very different picture depending on which statistics you use. So Europe indeed has 7% of the world's population. We have about 25% of the world's GDP. We generate about 1/3 of the world's university innovations. We pay about 50% of the world's social security costs. But if we take all 9 sectors of the technology business and we pick 5 biggest companies in each of those 9 segments, we'll find out that we have 3 European companies among those 45 companies, which brings us below the 7% that is our population share in the world. So somehow we lose 3/4 of that university innovation and fail to turn that into a business that would fund further research, education, healthcare, everything that we need. So we definitely need to work harder on this.
Thank you. May I pose again a question to you, Francis? Now, you definitely are amongst those who have translated knowledge, basic research findings into something very useful. And you have been working with the private sector. So would you have a comment? Now, of course, United States is much better in this translation than Europe, as we have noted and said here. So what are the basic elements that a researcher needs to be supported in this translation process?
Many good points have already been made by the panelists. We, in the United States, especially at my small university, we benefit from incredible diversity University. We attract the brightest young people from all over the world, and they're the ones who develop the ideas. Many of the companies that I've started where actually all the work was done by students from Europe, and you have to be willing to take risks. Getting out of your comfort zone is incredibly important. You have to be willing to take risks and be willing to fail. If you don't do anything hard unless you're willing to fail, and we as a society have to make failure acceptable, because then you try again, because life is long and you get multiple chances to do it. I won't share my failures with you. You can talk to my parents if you want that, but there are plenty of opportunities to fail and succeed, and you're more remembered for your successes than your failures.
Thank you.
First, Marja.
Yes.
To react to that, it's picking up on the last two speakers. It's not the people. I think we have brilliant people, but it's often the environment. If you look at the major innovations which have been realized by the United States in whatever field, if you look at the origin of these innovators, 38% were people who came from Europe, who did not see the opportunities in Europe for whatever reason, but they were brilliant people, but took the opportunity somewhere else. And that's why I fully agree with you. We have to, more than ever before, use the talents we have, and we have first-class talents in Europe, and give these people the chance to really deploy their creativity and their entrepreneurship in Europe, instead of letting these people go abroad. And of course they should go abroad, but we should also, to a large extent, for a sustainable society, economic sustainable society, have these people here and create these new businesses. Because we have been missing out big time on a lot of the radical and disruptive innovation which led to complete new markets. The Googles, the Ubers of this world, the Microsofts, and are not European, they are American. And that proved that we have been missing out because we have perhaps not offered the climate and the environment for these entrepreneurs, for these brilliant young people to deploy their knowledge here in Europe.
Right. Now I have Andreas, Tuula and Tuija. Andreas, please.
Yeah, and I also want to sort of make a comment on this. You know, if you look at the skills of workers around the world, in the wealthy countries now, Japan comes first and Finland comes second. And the United States comes below the OECD average. But again, you know, as many people have said here, the bright Finnish and the bright Japanese, they go to the United States to turn their skills into better jobs and better lives. No. We have to ask ourselves, you know, what makes the American society? I think diversity is one aspect. But I think the elephant in the room is labor markets. You know, who actually invests in people to take risks? How do you get venture capital? Try that in Europe and try that in the United States. Labor markets, they're open. Employers are actually willing to recognize your skills rather than looking at your credentials. It's much easier to find a job in the United States if you're highly talented, if you lack the credentials, including immigrants, than is the case in Europe. I think we have to ask these hard questions. We have to ask ourselves. If we don't change the environment in which people can extract value from their skills, turn their skills into better jobs and better lives, you know, you can have the most creative people, but they're going to go elsewhere where they can find those kinds of opportunities.
Thank you, Tuula.
You were mentioning these environments, you know, that's one of the other things that, you know, everybody wants a Silicon Valley, but they're really hard to establish, you know. You need to sort of found a Silicon Valley wherever, you know, it's hard. And so one of the things I think that, you know, that when you see emerging ecosystems, you know, you should support them by all means possible, no matter where they are, because you know, this opportunity may not come again, you know. So one of the things that happened, you know, is that it's not like, you know, people are not interested in being entrepreneurs, for instance, in Finland, if something interesting is happening in Finland. So, but you need to have some kind of a start, you know. So like our students started this, and then the entrepreneurs who had moved to United States because there wasn't anything interesting happening in Finland, then they came because now something interesting was happening. And then it turned into this positive cycle. But the thing is that, you know, when this kind of thing happens in Europe, oftentimes what happens is that people try to multiply it in different parts of Europe instead of supporting, you know, where it's born. You know, so I think we should really try to see, you know, where something is happening. It's the same thing with scientific excellence, that, you know, if you have it somewhere, you should support it. And so I think one of the things is to take really good care of those entrepreneurial ecosystems that are being grown.
Thank you, Tuula. Tuija, microphone here, please.
As the panelist pointed out, we have the basic education to bring up the people. Risto pointed out that we actually have the university innovations. So it's really the end of the cycle that we're missing. And often enough, when you talk to researchers, they find it very difficult to find the money that it takes to make an invention, an innovation. And I'd like to ask you whether you have any thoughts on how at the EU level we should react to that.
I think you mentioned rightly that if you look at Skype, a European invention, but fully commercialized in the United States. The MP3 player, invention of Germany, commercialized in the United States. Booking.com, which we all use, a Dutch invention, but commercialized and bought up in the United States. And why is that? And that is, of course, this famous valley of death, that when at a given time new technology need to be rolled out, we are missing big time venture capital or venture capital organizations which have a scale and scope that they can really make a difference. We are working at the moment on a big fund of funds for venture capital, for equity financing, that will be implemented as of next year. So we take the necessary measures at European level to make sure that these radical market creation, disruptive innovations can indeed also happen in Europe, instead of that the ideas come from Europe, but then following the commercialization happens then in other parts of the world. So it's something on which we are working, because we see very clearly that the big bottleneck of Europe at the moment, very good in generating the ideas, not very good in then commercializing the ideas or bringing the ideas to the stock market. So that is something on which we need to work, and we are working at the moment on that.
Thank you, Risto.
Yeah, I'm actually an entrepreneur, and I have co-founded a venture capital company that has gone through 2 funds by now. I have, as a business angel, invested in about 40 companies, and I have yet to see a single European high promise startup that can't get funding. There's one exception. There are certain cases where a company requires funding beyond 100 million euros. And that kind of money is hard to find from European VCs. But these companies get it from the West Coast VCs, if they are worth it. Oftentimes they have to be domiciled in the United States as part of that process, and they are sort of lost as a European company. Typically some R&D function remains here in Europe, but the company itself moves over to the US. But the vast majority of companies have access to funding if they are good enough. The one thing that we are completely missing is a large home market, which slows down our initial progress and buries us under the red tape of trying to tackle the fragmented European market. In Finland, we jokingly say that when you open your garage door in California, what do you see? A market of 350 million people. What do you see when you open your garage door here in Finland? 1 meter of snow. And that is so true. So I think the EU project just needs to go forward in search of a real single market. And for example, the Digital Single Market Initiative that is currently being worked, and it has been worked on for 10 years, as a complete failure. Now you need to complete it. I'm not saying that creating fund of funds and providing more funding for VCs is a bad thing. It may even be a useful thing, but that's not really the bottleneck.
You're absolutely right. The biggest bottleneck still is notably on the digital single market, that there is no in Europe digital single market. If you have here in Finland a subscription to a television station, paid channel for football, and you go on holiday to Spain, you can't watch the geo-blocking. And there are hundreds of examples.
One of my companies has a software solution that provides.
Well, I know also how you can do it in other ways. But we have a big issue. Copyright if you look at, we have an old-fashioned copyright directive. Text and data mining are not allowed in Europe. That is something which in the United States you can do in Japan. So the digital single market is a top priority, but we always have to do in Europe, and that is the big problem. So with 28 national countries, with 28 national interests, who instead of looking at the great and the long term, look at their own selfish national interests. And that's why the European process is such a slow process. Yeah.
Thank you. Now I think we go over to you, Johanna, and just as a little introduction to what you're going to say, this morning we had a session with Robert Jan in the Ministry of Education and Culture, and we listened to 4 ERC starting grant awardees. To the younger generation here, the ERC grant, European Research Council grant, is the best you can get. You must be very, very good, and it's a lot of money, and it gives you a lot of opportunities and freedom. And it was quite stunning, as you said, Robert Jan, in this particular meeting, that these 4, whose task it is not to create innovations or benefits at large for society. The money is to do fundamental research. Each of them had avenues for translation of the research findings into benefits for society. So now, Johanna, you represent the fundamental researcher here. What do you have to say?
Yes, so I was given the title Excellence in Fundamental Research, and I first started to think about what is excellence. And when I heard about the prize and the topic of the prize, I thought, how interesting. Because in the case of the prize, the excellence stems from accelerated evolution. So you're causing mistakes and you're trying to find good things out of that. In my field, cancer research, excellence is exactly the opposite. So our problem is accelerated evolution. In each tumor, there's accelerated evolution that makes things just worse and worse and worse and generates resistance and tumor progression. And in our field, the excellence is trying to combat what your excellence is. So this kind of tells you the basics that excellence can only be, I think, defined within a certain field. And only the people who are integral to that field will understand and be able to evaluate fully what is excellence in a certain topic. So I think that the sort of bottom-up ideas that we were discussing this morning, where the scientists themselves define excellence and define the criteria and define the goals, what would be even better, I think are very important and should be appreciated, rather than policymakers trying to tell us how excellent we should be and in what area. Then I was very grateful that the title had the word fundamental, because fundamental research is often referred to as basic research. And it's a bit of a dirty word, really. You mentioned basic research, and I think people just think you're simple because you do something basic. Or maybe that's why the policymakers think that basic research isn't important. I don't think it's a dirty word, but the fundamental research is a better word because I think it contains the important word foundation. And fundamental research is the foundation of every innovation. Fundamental research is what we're now discussing is generating the bottleneck, because we have so much important things that we could generate into innovations, but we only had those generated innovations and we didn't have the foundation. Pretty soon we wouldn't have a bottleneck because we wouldn't have a bottle. So I think the fundamental research is thank you, very, very important. Today, at the discussion, we heard about Hannes Lohi, who studies genetics in dogs. And we heard from Mustjoki about how she studies autoimmune disease and leukemia. And if we look back, without fundamental research, if Watson and Crick hadn't figured out how DNA is made, or if Sanger, the double winner of the Nobel Prize, who always insisted on working at the bench and only doing fundamental research, if he hadn't figured out how to sequence, we wouldn't have all this wealth of data that we now have, where people can find out about mutations, generate targeted therapies, and use this wealth of information that we're now getting from the genetics. So I think the history of science is full of these kinds of examples where curiosity by someone has led to a major discovery that then has either directly or indirectly also led to innovations. And I think science is fundamentally driven by curiosity and passion, exactly the same things that starting a business probably is. And I think that it's very important to still continue to fund fundamental research, support that curiosity, support that passion, so that we can keep coming up with new important findings that will take us to places that nobody can really dream about at the moment. How to best then promote the achievement of excellence in fundamental research. One of the important things that I think many people who don't actually work in fundamental research don't appreciate is how important resources are. Resources are everything. Our top Formula 1 drivers don't drive a Lada. That's just because they could never go fast enough. And the same is true for fundamental research. If you don't have the biggest telescopes, if you don't have the best microscopes, if you don't have the core facilities that support your research at a high enough level, there's just no way you can do it, no matter how clever you are. And this is something that the EU has been very good at. Also, Academy of Finland has had this infrastructure funding. And I think this is the other balance. So we have to try to generate innovation so that we can get outcome, monetary outcome, that can then hopefully be fed back to resources that can further foster the excellence. But I think these are important. Without resources, the fundamental research can never reach excellence, at least in experimental sciences, which I think are the topic of today. So with that, I think that was all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Sirpa Jalkanen, our Master of Ceremony from yesterday, she's academician of science, which means that she's really working at the outstanding level in fundamental research, but she's also an innovator. So would you have something to say, Sirpa, about the relationship of fundamental research efforts and applicational thoughts and the applicational pathway?
So maybe I don't have anything very general to say here, but I have always had a passion to find the answers to these fundamental questions. I've also always have the vision, because I'm working in the medicine, I have always had a dream that one day and that has been a driving force in my life, and that's why I have taken the fundamental findings to applications and also founded companies. And it has been really rewarding so far, and it has also, to me, been extremely fascinating journey in the life, because so many different things have happened, really exciting ones, and I have, during the journey, met a lot of different types of people, learned quite a lot, and hopefully also help youngsters to start and being some kind of encouraging person for them, also to girls, to take this type of profession as well. So not to be afraid of math or physics or chemistry. That were my kind of interest when I was young in the high school. I just loved them, no problem. And I think that in our class we were many girls who did the same.
Thank you very much. Shall we move to the research infrastructure issue that Johanna just mentioned? So indeed, without state-of-the-art... sorry, you have an intervention. Please, Risto.
Our academician was now the third person who mentioned the word dream here. So I just have to repeat one of my favorite sayings, which goes like this. There are those among us who see things as they are and ask why. And then there are those who dream of things that never were and ask why not. And the first part, in my opinion, it defines a scientist. We observe the world, we see how the world works, and we ask why. We are curious, how does it work? And then we discover something new. But then there are those among us who see things that never were, and they ask why not? And those are the entrepreneurs. And then we have some people who are both. And you can be an entrepreneur who thinks like a scientist, or you can be a scientist who thinks like an entrepreneur, or a university president who thinks like an entrepreneur. I think we all should be both.
Thank you very much. Very, very good comment. Thank you. Going to research infrastructure, we just need it, and it's more and more expensive. We need state-of-the-art research infrastructure, of course, and Johanna highlighted this need, and we need long-term plans, long-term sustainability of the infrastructures. This has been a Europe-wide effort as well. And you mentioned this in the ICOS event, Robert Jan, so would you like to repeat the European plans to assist in maintaining sustainability, what concerns now very expensive state-of-the-art infrastructures?
Well, these, notably the large-scale facilities, are extremely expensive, the telescopes, and for that reason, increasingly, European countries together are building these equipments. The extreme large telescope will be built in Chile, in the desert, by 15 countries. The spallation source will be built in Lund by 12 countries, the free electron lasers in Hamburg. So we see increasingly that European countries pull together in order to build really the next generation of large-scale facilities. And there's been a whole action plan made by the European Union with the member states to build those. And up to now, there has been an investment involved of 12 billion. Because I fully agree with Johanna, without these top-notch equipment, you cannot extend the frontiers of knowledge. Yeah? And by the way, I mentioned deliberately frontiers of knowledge because we never apply the word basic research or fundamental research, but in the ERC we talk about frontier knowledge, frontier research, because the objective is to extend the frontiers of knowledge.
Any comments on this?
Maybe I could add something. So I think it's also important to realize, and I think researchers are increasingly realizing that you don't necessarily need to have all the really cutting-edge instruments at your own institute, and that these should be collected in places that function like open access facilities for two reasons. First of all, they're very complicated instruments, and not every scientist can actually learn to use them at their best level. They're very expensive, so not everybody can have their own. And I think then there are several benefits in putting these into open access places. First of all, people need to start to talk with each other within EU or Europe about their projects, because they need to apply to get to use those instruments. And then there will be, of course, when resources are put together, they can be extended to much more than if they're more fragmented. That's been done, I think, very well in Finland now and is continued to be done. And now Turku is the Eurobioimaging node for the ESFRI, and so that's now starting to try to do this on a European level. But there again, different national interests seem to be an issue. So not everybody wants to open up their laboratory for external researchers to come and use, because then they think they have less time on the equipment and they don't realize how many other opportunities open at the same time.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
So indeed now we have this national research infrastructure strategy and roadmap, which functions according to the important criteria, openness that you mentioned, but it also demands that the host institutions of researchers have a sustainable plan what concerns research infrastructure. And Tuula, you have been working in the Aalto context exactly on this. Would you like to say a few words?
Tuija knows this much better, maybe if you would like to answer this question, because Tuija has been actually organizing. It's true, as you say, that we need to have a plan, and it needs to be a long-term plan, and the universities will have to take their own responsibility, but because they're so expensive, it's not enough, so maybe Tuija will tell more about it.
Well, yes, it's a huge investment. The university as a whole uses about 30 million euros per year in research infrastructures. It's a huge sum of money out of the total budget of the university, and it needs to be very well spent to bring the excellent results that we have and need. There are a couple of things that we've done to foster the development of the facilities. First of all, we identified the most expensive infrastructures that really support our key research areas and provided university-level funding to those. And that has had the positive impact of not only the funding that makes them more accessible to a larger number of users, but they've also, with that funding, been very successful in competition of external funding for those research infrastructures from the Academy of Finland or from EU and other sources. So it's money invested brings in other money, as in everywhere, money comes to money. The second thing that we're right now doing is to trying to consolidate our infrastructures to tighter spaces, as we are trying to gain some savings, but also to make research environments where that would be more open to a wider user base, both within the university to foster use of infrastructures across disciplinary boundaries, department boundaries, across school boundaries, but also to open those to our stakeholders, to small companies who may not have the equipment available at their disposal, so that they can develop technologies and then decide on how to go forward. And so this is sort of an ongoing effort that needs taking care of. And it's a tough job because it involves many different issues. It involves the spaces. Some are very special. Some buildings have to be rooted to the bedrock in order for catching very highly weak signals in order the building not to shake. And some require other very specific arrangements for them. So there's a wide variety of needs regarding spaces. Then there are the equipment themselves, who often can cost several million euros and need continuous improvement, continuous replacement. The infrastructure is never ready. Even if we provided her with the best equipment in the world, next year she'd be back and say things have moved forward, now there's a better one and I want that too. So it's something that is continuous. And then there are people. We need people to maintain the infrastructures. We need people to provide the services. If we want to open them for other users, there need to be people who know how to use the equipment and who can guide new users to those. And so it's sort of a many-faceted problem that needs continuous taking care of.
Thank you very much. So you talked about also opening up the university's research infrastructure maybe for small companies. What about, Risto, the other way around? Would private sector's infrastructure that would serve research, could it be opened under some conditions to researchers from the universities?
Well, we live the era of the sharing economy,
yes.
So absolutely we need to find efficiencies everywhere, and having a piece of expensive equipment which stands unused for part of the time is a complete waste. And collaboration between companies and universities and research teams is definitely useful for both parties. So absolutely.
Thank you. Now, during this exercise of building the National Research Infrastructure Strategy and Roadmap, which is the long-term plan for development of research infrastructure, we undertook several surveys. So we asked the research organizations, universities and research institutes to name their local strategically important research infrastructure which cannot be opened. And so we gathered information about this. Now we have a survey of research infrastructures in the academic hospitals going on. And then we have been talking for 2 years about, a survey trying to look at what is available in the private sector, in the companies. So this is a task that the newly appointed Research Infrastructure Committee no doubt will embark on. So now I think that we go, Risto, to your intervention, please.
Okay, you talked earlier how we started from education and we went upwards to universities and upwards to EU level and then further up to foundational research, and now we go back down to companies. But actually we fund all of you. So I'll use Nokia as an example. And Nokia is a fairly large company. We employ about 70,000 engineers, of whom 40,000 do R&D work and research work. And about 30,000 others work with customers to implement the products and provide technical services attached to those products. So how do you organize research when you have tens of thousands of people doing either R or D? And you do it as thinking about it as a portfolio. So first of all, we have 5 business groups that do a lot of R&D work. And that R&D work is very close to customers. So our customers' needs and requirements steer much of that work, which is very natural. But it often also is not real breakthrough fundamental research because it's too close to everyday problems of the customers. They want the solution next year, not in 5 years. But actually one of our 5 business groups is a special one. It's called Nokia Technologies. It's the group that manages our 90,000 patents, which we license. They also have a research arm that works to replenish those patents. Roughly 60% of the patents from the Nokia group have historically come from that research arm. But we also, in addition to licensing the patents themselves, we build technologies around those patents. For example, a large part of the voice codecs that are in MP3 players or mobile phones or TVs are actually programmed by Nokia, and the IP is held by Nokia. So we sell the technology as well, not just the patent license. And then some of those technologies we build into products that we bring to market as an experimental project. And sometimes we commercialize those products. How many of you have heard about Nokia Ozo? Hands up. Ozo, quite many actually. Ozo is a virtual reality camera. And a unique one. It's by far ahead of everything else in that domain. And that product is a result of more than 10 years of research in imaging, in audio. And it's now in the market. Movies are being shot with it. NASA is thinking about establishing it into the space station, so anybody can take virtual reality glasses and be out in space in real time. And you can watch down to the Earth, or you can turn your head and look away from the Earth, or follow the moon as it goes across the empty space. And you can do wonderful things with this technology. So those are the 5 business groups. We also have a research arm, which is called Bell Labs. And Bell Labs is really focused on the toughest possible problems. We have 13 areas where we want to do groundbreaking innovation, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in a moment. But these are not enough. We also have internal startups. So we can create a team, maybe 50 people at first, maybe 100 people, give them freedom from the corporate red tape, allow them to establish their own brand, and start working on something that has promise, but is very risky. And for it to succeed, it requires a startup entrepreneurial method of bringing it up. And a company called Nuage is a good example of that. And then we also have a very large corporate venturing effort called Nokia Growth Partners with over 1 billion in capital under management. And they invest in startups. So far they have been party to creating 4 technology unicorns. So young companies with a market cap of over 1 billion. And then of course all these groups collaborate with academia, research agencies and companies and startups. But about Bell Labs, it's quite humbling to think about that. Established in 1925, it has generated some very fundamental research. In 1948, Claude Shannon founded the field of information theory, which is the basis of almost everything in IT. In 1950s, discovered the point contact transistor, which doesn't tell anything to you, but it's the basis behind laser. It's the basis behind solar cells. In the 1960s, Bell Labs was the prime contractor behind the first live satellite TV network. 1970s, Bell Labs innovated Unix and the C language, the first demonstration of a fiber optic network, and the invention of the cellular concept, and the creation of the first commercial cellular network. In the 1980s, the digital DSP, digital signal processor, which is the magic behind games and computers that do graphics, voice communication over mobile, and many other things. Later on, the charge-coupled device, or the CCD, which is the invention behind digital cameras. And that's being used in today from everything from fridges to mobile phones. And then as an example of something very recent, we this year launched the Nokia Photonic Service Engine, which is an optical networking piece of equipment, which is so efficient that we can provide a real live Netflix stream through one fiber, which is the width of a human hair, to every single person in the Nordic countries at the same time. So think about it, one hair, and so much data through that every single person in the Nordic countries will get a different live Netflix stream. So very much sort of 10x type improvements that we are looking after. And with the X we sort of mean the unknown. The 10 means that we are not after everyday problems. We need to do at least 10x improvements. And we have 13 different domains where we work, where we want to revolutionize something that is meaningful. And just as one example, the Future Cell project, which is working on a cellular base station that wouldn't require power at all. It would be able to fully function on solar energy. And that would revolutionize many things about the cellular networks and completely change the way they can be built. So I believe that this is exactly the kind of a time when fundamental research is not just important, it's mandatory. The humankind faces so many existential challenges with our environment, with air, with water, with the climate, you name it. And I, for one, am really happy to be able to work with people who are trying to come up with solutions to some of those existential challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marja, please. Microphone over there, please. Marja, raise your hand, yes.
Okay, I'm Marja Penttila from VTT, and inspired by your talk and also wondering over the years, because we're doing a lot of research with companies, and also we have done a lot of research with US companies. And you see the speed in which the technology is proceeding in the big companies, in the leader companies. And for instance, in my field, I see that very often the universities are far behind of what actually is happening inside the companies, and partly because the reason that the companies have a lot of money, they can take the newest technology, newest research. But please do not repeat what we have done. Of course, I mean, you can always repeat it in another way, but you see what I mean in a way. So also the companies, I think they should open up in a way what is already done, what has failed, or what reasons. They should publish more, not just the patents. And I see this is, in general, of course, a problem, that there is so much research which is unpublished, but in particular the big companies are doing so fine things, and Nokia, of course, being one example.
So maybe not everybody heard exactly what you said, Merja, but am I correct in summarizing that you make a statement that in many times and in your field, the companies are ahead what concerns now research as compared to the universities, and there's a lot of issues which are not disclosed, that is, and results that have been generated in companies, and you're asking what now, how should we see the interaction between the academic world and the companies to sort of have an effective process? Who wants to answer? Yes.
Maybe I can say something in my field. So of course, Big Pharma does cancer research, for instance, at a total sort of different volume that we could ever do. What is increasingly being done now is that actually big pharma companies make partnerships with academic laboratories, either to take on early projects that at the moment they're not sure if they're going to work. They can give around their compounds that are not proceeding in the pipeline to see if anybody can find another use for them. And so they are increasingly trying to look for partnerships. One of the big problems, I think, is a lot of the legal stuff. So that takes a long time, all the material transfer agreements, confidentiality agreements, these sort of things. But something we're seeing, at least in Turku now with the biobank, is that once those negotiations have been done once, then they like to use the same partner again and again, because then you don't have to go through this same grief again. So I think that is something that's being increasingly done. It's also something where I think scientists could be much more proactive themselves. They could themselves try to search for opportunities and try to contact pharma companies to get these kind of joint projects. But I think a lot of resources are wasted, of course, with pharma companies competing with each other on the same target, but also then I suppose also academic laboratories trying to do something that has already been done in a company but hasn't been disclosed, so yes.
You mentioned public-private partnership, and this is something that is very much highlighted in the recent Thomson Reuters analysis about the innovation activity, the global innovation activity. So the sort of not new trend, but nevertheless an increasing trend is the public-private partnerships between companies and universities and research institutes and governmental agencies, which now find each other not in the traditional way that somebody knows somebody and has read something, but through web information, and this is global collaborations across the borders. Any comments here?
Okay. Actually, I have one question.
Yes.
And first, I'm Tatu Tyni. I come from the field of art, from theater, dance, and circus. And we have done an innovation, how to make digital effects, characters, and setups known as in movies, how we can do that in real time in the theater. And I have some questions. Like that we have in Finland the problem when you open the garage, there's a lot in theater world in Finland, we don't have that kind of problems. When we open the garage, we have the best theater buildings in the world here. We have really technicians. And now we have worked with the Finnish engineers. They are brilliant. They are absolutely brilliant with a lot of knowledge. But they only need someone who directs them. But when we go to the theater world, we have the problem, and we have a really huge problem, and that is the Finnish theater system, which do not allow to use Finnish innovations. It is somehow similar problem like in Soviet Union, when Mikhail Bulgakov wrote A Master and Margarita. The system did not allow to publish it, and that is somehow the problem at the moment in Finnish theater world, because we can really make a huge global business, but these normal systems at the moment does not allow to use it. That is the problem in our business.
Wow. So are you, yes, Risto?
Yeah, if I may comment briefly, it's actually not my opinion that the snow is a problem. For many of us, it's a delight whenever we get it. And the problem is really the lack of the single market. And that's what draws many of us to the US market, where you can reach critical mass much quicker. And we need to work on that, and we all know that. The big difference between the US and Europe culturally, as many of us have experienced on a personal level, is that in the US people think that yes, we can. And in Europe we think yes, we should. And that can be seen from our norms and legislation and directives and what do we govern. We protect everything. We resist change. In the US, it's much more natural to embrace change and see an opportunity instead of a threat. And it may only be a difference of a degree, but when you accumulate it over hundreds of millions of people and tens of years, it starts to have a very significant impact. And that's what we need to change in ourselves. And of course we resist that change as well. So your theater system that resists using new technology and thinks that the way things were done before is the right thing is a good example, but that same example keeps on repeating itself in the European way of thinking. But the younger generation, again, is a little bit better in this. It's just a pity that the civil servants and the politicians and the decision makers in companies are not from the younger generation. So, but we need to push ourselves on this.
Thank you. I have a question to you just shortly before you, please, Risto, about the Bell laboratories. So is there any knowledge in Finland? Are there people with talent, skills who would be valuable for the Bell laboratories' ambitions?
Well, the Bell laboratory is like any top university. We get lots of applicants, and everybody is invited to apply. If you have some thoughts, what is your dream? What is the big hairy problem that you would like to solve, and you have an idea of how you take that first step? Send in the application, and maybe you'll be working there. And it is a great place for innovation. We don't have any special projects through which we search for people from Finland, for example. But I'd love to see Finns working in Bell Labs.
So especially the younger generation here, keep this in mind. And then we had a question over there.
Any better? Okay, here we go. So, you should have told us that we have to shake it first. Very good. So my name is Jan Ignatius. I actually work for Nokia, but I'm here on a kind of out of private interest. And what I wanted to ask you is we had this discussion about sharing already on some of the earlier statements that we need to share equipment, we need to share knowledge, and we need to share also knowledge between private and the public sector. But also, there seems to be this kind of problem with the existing way of sharing information, and I've seen it in the news quite recently a lot, that a lot of the research, even done on the public side, is kind of lost behind different kind of paywalls. That different kind of publications own the paper itself, that if you want to read it and cite it in your own research, then you have to pay money for that, which is fine for larger institutions that have maybe some kind of existing agreement with the publishers to get the information, but that leaves out a lot of people that would have the opportunity, for example, the entrepreneurs, to find new information and kind of build on top of existing research, but are kind of cut out of this due to the fact that they are kind of hidden behind a little bit.
Try again. Yeah, please.
For innovation also in this that is two parties, and it only affects, benefits those two and leaves everything else outside of it. So are there any opportunities to kind of, whether it's European-wide legislations or some other methods on how we could improve giving this visibility to a larger group of people, both the universities but also for smaller players? Because of course we've seen this development in software for open source research, technologies and so forth, that what it can actually bring onto the table when things are shared in a more open manner.
Thank you. You're hitting the issue of open access to data. Robert Jan, please.
Well, that's at the moment, I think, top priority for us. Open access publications, open access data. Open access publications, there are in many countries negotiations going on between universities and the publishers in order to see to what extent we can go to full open access in the next couple of years. And certainly from the side of the public side, the funders, we are of the opinion that if research is funded through the public purse, the results of that research should be freely available for everyone. And it should not be the case that then people have to subscribe to very expensive journals to be able to read what the public purse has financed. With regard to open access data, also there, we all recall the article, I think in The Economist of a couple of months ago, in which a lot of scientific experiments could not be reproduced because the underlying data were not there anymore. So we need to really deal with data, which many people consider as the new gold or the new oil, in a completely different way. And for that reason, we are on the Horizon 2020, our funding program, going to require from each researcher to who we give a grant that there is a data management plan. A data management plan in which the researcher describes how he or she is going to share the data, curate the data, make the data interoperable, to ensure that this investment in generating data is not leading to data completely disappearing or based on local systems which afterwards are not maintained. So we are working big time. As a matter of fact, this Friday, the Ministers of Science of the European Union will get together in Brussels, and they will conclude that by 2020 there should be full open access to publications with clear embargo periods for green open access. They will also conclude that for open access data, there should be indeed data management plans in future, that we have to pay much more attention to indeed curation, storage, preservation of data, but most of all the sharing of data. Because of course it's awful that experiments, as you rightly said, have to be done again and again and again because the underlying data are not there anymore. And that's a very big waste of taxpayers' money.
Thank you. Indeed, Finland has been one of the top countries in Europe to drive a national open access policy. So you, Andreas, have a question, comment?
I just wanted to challenge Risto on actually one point. I mean, you raised the issue of, fragmented markets, demand side, and I buy all of this. I think there's a lot of problems in Europe. But I think it's really only part of the story, a small part probably. I mean, most frontier companies can plug into global value chains today, I mean, you can see global markets, and we actually see that happening. And we have to ask ourselves why it is not happening at this scale it is possible. Yes, you can open your garage doors, you see a meter of snow, and you can still, work with people all around the world, produce and sell your knowledge products anywhere, and that's what successful companies do. I think we have to ask ourselves, why, do many companies, and I think Nokia is a great exception perhaps, but why do many companies see, short-term gains much more important as the long-term future of their own business enterprises? Why do companies, pharmaceutical, Johanna mentioned the pharmaceutical industry, actually ask yourself, where does this industry not invest in things that could be hugely beneficial for society? And then we have to sort of probe some of those questions, and it comes also to public policy. Where do we provide the kind of incentives for those things to happen?
It's wonderful to be challenged. It's the best moment for the last few hours. I fully agree with you on the part that there are so many low-hanging fruits that we can pick and make things so much more efficient all around us. We are making so many sub-optimized decisions, and short-termism is prevalent in European politicians, politics overall, and business leadership. And not just in Europe, but in many other parts of the world. However, I completely disagree with you on the claim that the lack of a single market would not be a central detriment to European business success and turning research into real innovation. Let's just think about an easy example, Uber. When they entered Europe, every country became a separate project with different legislative issues, with different regulations, with different practices, with different languages, with different customs, with different everything. I'm involved personally in a food couriering service called Wolt. And we just opened up Stockholm. We first opened up a number of Finnish cities. And Stockholm, it's a completely different world, how it works. When a US-based competitor expands from San Francisco to Los Angeles, there's very little difference. That's of course within the same state. When they expand from California to Colorado, there's very little difference. They can take the same model and just reapply it. And that's fast, that's cheap, or that's affordable. We are just slowed down by these differences that are, in the grand scale of things, completely unreasonable and completely unnecessary. So I challenged you back.
I can just, if we keep on challenging each other, I can just support that very much. Take patenting. How long did it take before we got a European patent? And that innovators had to file in each country a patent. And still today, after lengthy negotiations going on for 30 years, there's a kind of a hybrid compromise because certain countries still wanted that it's in Spanish or in French instead of, okay, let's go for one language, and really you can file it in one country and then it's valid for the whole European Union. So we have to overcome, if we as a continent want to really continue competing with the rest of the world and remain attractive, we have to create this internal market. We have to create a digital single market, and we have to indeed complete the internal market, because that's the only way for us to survive. And I fully recognize the frustration that you have with your company, that you have to go to each country again to get certified, to get approval from local authorities. You lose time, and certainly in new businesses it's all about speed. And secondly, it's cost a fortune in engaging lawyers and people who have to then register things or settle the paperwork for you. So I can really understand the frustration. And that's why we need in Europe a much more common approach to certain elements. And we could give many examples of that. The refugee crisis is another nice example, where we all want to have a common policy, but as soon as we then say, listen, these are the numbers which each country has to take, then we say, whoa, sorry, well, we don't want to take so many, we want to take. So we need to have much more a common European approach to certain issues like that, because else this continent will not have a great future, and I want that this continent has a great future.
And the Risto has really, the last word.
The frustration really comes from the fact that nobody wins from these differences in the bureaucratic structures. Sweden is no better off from the fact that they do food hygiene through different types of certificates than Finland. They have basically the same content. They're just structured differently. And of course maybe the lawyers get paid and the civil servants get paid and there's overlapping organizations and all that. But it's waste.
You Finns always like to pick on the Swedes, I have understood.
But they are worth it.
Okay, it's time to thank the panelists and the audience for an outstanding discussion, and I would like to close by quoting you, Risto. Why is the answer of the researcher, why not? The question, and why not is the question of the innovator. And apparently we need in Europe to change our mindset from we should into we can. Thank you very much, and we have now coffee, and then please be back in half an hour to listen to the Millennium Technology Prize winners, Studia Generalia, moderated by Professor Howie Jacobs over there. Thank you very much.